There is a moment in the silent life of the soul when everything seems to fall out of alignment. When what once made sense begins to crumble, and yet, something strange and deep arises, as if something ancient is calling from within. Many can't name it. Some feel it as a longing for home, without knowing where that home is. Others, as an inexplicable urge to search, but for what, exactly? Maybe answers. Maybe reconnection. Maybe to remember something that was never truly forgotten. For centuries, this quest was guided by spiritual traditions, by songs around sacred fires, by symbols carved in stone and stories whispered by elders. But the modern mind, hungry for logic and proof, chose to dismiss this wisdom. It called it superstition, myth, religion. As if what couldn't be measured under a microscope couldn't hold truth. And yet now the veils begin to break. What was once separated, spirituality and science, starts to meet eye to eye. What if sacred texts that speak of creation, symbols repeated in cultures divided by oceans, and rituals passed through millennia weren't just legends? What if they were poetic attempts to describe the same realities that modern physics, with its cold and exact language, is only now beginning to touch? Today, neuroscientists speak of neuroplasticity as if they've just discovered that thought shapes the brain. But Tibetan monks have been teaching this for centuries with mantras and visualizations. Epigenetics reveals that our emotions and environment influence our DNA, as if it's a groundbreaking discovery. But ancient healers already knew, buried feelings make the body sick, and gratitude's vibration heals. What we call cutting-edge science might, in fact, be the humble rediscovery of what the ancients once knew by heart. They named the invisible with metaphors, we try to measure it with equations. But both are speaking of the same thing, energy. Consciousness. Creation. Gregg Braden is one of the scientists who dared to walk between these two worlds. He didn't choose sides. He chose bridges. And he invites us to walk with him, between shamans and physicists, monks and neuroscientists, sacred codes and genetic codes. In this video, we will cross that bridge together. Not in haste, but with the reverence of those stepping onto ancient wisdom, and the clarity of those who honor the logic that observes the invisible. We'll explore ancient maps and modern discoveries. And we'll see where they meet. Because what once seemed like opposites, may actually be the same mystery, just spoken in a different language. Take a deep breath. This is a journey of reunion. With what the ancients once knew. With what science is only now confirming. And, above all, with what you've been feeling for a long time, that something greater is moving inside you. And maybe, just maybe, what you're feeling, is truth coming home. There is something mysterious in repetition. When symbols emerge in civilizations that never met, across time spans of thousands of years, something within us awakens, as if we're facing a forgotten language that feels strangely familiar. Chakras in the East. The tree of life in mystical Western traditions. The Merkaba among ancient Hebrews. Different codes, yes, but all pointing to the same body, the same field, the same consciousness. Sacred texts aren't just stories, they are vibrational maps. And the ancients knew this. They weren't merely describing the external world, but the energetic architecture of the human being. Each chakra is a center of power. Each saphira on the tree of life, a frequency of the soul. The Merkaba, a geometric field of ascension. These weren't metaphors meant to inspire. They were keys for awakening. Today, we call this bioenergy. Electromagnetic field. Holographic consciousness. But in essence, it's the same, a body that vibrates, feels, perceives, and creates. The symbolic language of the ancients was a sensitive way to translate the invisible, which science is only now trying to measure. What if the human body is more than biology? Gregg Braden reminds us that the heart is not just an organ pumping blood, it is a brain. An energetic brain, capable of sending more signals to the cranial brain than the other way around. This discovery, made by the HeartMath Institute, revolutionizes our understanding of consciousness. Because it shows that emotion, not thought, is the first impulse of reality. Heart coherence, the state in which the heart, brain, and breath vibrate in harmony, is more than a wellness technique. It is a bridge between what we feel and what we manifest. Monks knew this when meditating on compassion. Yogis accessed it through deep breathing. They didn't have machines to measure brainwaves, but they had states of presence that today astonish any electroencephalogram. In temples and deserts, in silence or in chants, they accessed altered states of consciousness. And now, with sensors and data, science confirms, the body in meditative states enters coherence, alters brain frequencies, and expands its electromagnetic field. The invisible becomes measurable. And at the center of it all, DNA. So intimate, so sacred. The ancients said, the human is made in the image and likeness of the divine. Today, Bruce Lipton shows us that we are not victims of our DNA, but co-authors of its expression. Epigenetics reveals that thoughts, emotions, and environment determine which genes activate or stay silent. Dense emotions block. Elevated feelings liberate. This revelation isn't new, it's ancestral. But now, it gains scientific language. Shamans spoke of vibrational healing. We speak of genetic reprogramming. But deep down, we're speaking of the same thing. The same miracle, the body listening to the soul. Matter responding to consciousness. Vibration shaping form. The human body isn't just flesh. It's an antenna. A temple. A mirror. When you vibrate gratitude, it emits light. When you become still, it listens to the field. When you love, it heals. Not by magic, but by coherence. This reunion is beginning to happen. Between ancient codes and modern data. Between symbols carved in stone and graphs printed in labs. Both say, you are energy. You are consciousness. And your body is the bridge between the visible and the invisible. And when you cross that bridge, something awakens. Everything begins with a silent question: what if the world we see isn't all there is? What if what appears solid, predictable, and fixed is, in truth, just a surface, a projection shaped by something far subtler? Quantum physics, with all its mathematical precision, takes us precisely to this threshold of mystery. It doesn't offer final answers. It opens portals. The theory of non-locality reveals that two particles, once connected, remain entangled, even when separated by unimaginable distances. What happens to one instantly affects the other. This defies time, space, and conventional logic. But it confirms what ancient traditions always whispered: everything is connected. It always has been. Shamans called it the web of life. Buddhists spoke of interbeing. The Vedas described Akasha as the field where everything is recorded. Now, scientists describe the quantum field as an invisible ocean of possibilities. Gregg Braden goes further. He invites us to feel that this field isn't out there, but right here, within us. Nothing is fixed until it is observed. This is the principle of wave function collapse. What seems like reality only defines itself when consciousness is present. What the ancients called prayer, sacred focus, or intention, science now recognizes as the observer effect. A vibrational choice that collapses the infinite into form. Reality doesn't happen to you. It happens through you. This subtle field is not just energy, it is information. Rupert Sheldrake, a visionary biologist, called it morphogenetic fields. Invisible templates that organize the behavior of cells, organisms, and systems. They function as collective memories, and again, the ancients were right. The idea of Akashic records, found in the Vedas, Gnosticism, and esoteric writings, resonates deeply. Past information continues to vibrate. And it influences the present. These fields help explain recurring family patterns, behaviors that appear without rational cause, and inherited traumas that don't dissolve through logic alone. They suggest there's an inheritance beyond genetics, a vibrational legacy. And when we recognize it, we can heal not only ourselves but the timelines that flow through us. That's why ancestral rituals weren't just symbolic ceremonies. They were vibrational protocols. Each sound, each gesture, each geometry activated a specific frequency. And these practices appear, with variations but the same essence, in cultures that never met. Tibetan mandalas. Indigenous chants. Yogic postures. Sacred geometry in Egypt. None of it is coincidence. These elements are keys. Access codes to expanded states of consciousness. They attune us. Reconnect us. Remind us. And in that remembering, our vibration changes. And with it, our reality. When a mantra is chanted from the heart, it doesn't just resonate in the ears, it alters the surrounding field. When a symbol is contemplated in silence, it doesn't just decorate, it awakens. When a sacred dance is performed in trance, it's not the body that moves, it's the spirit that reveals itself. These mysteries of creation don't belong to science or religion. They belong to life. And now, science and spirituality are beginning to speak the same language. The language of the invisible that creates the visible. The language of feeling that precedes knowing. The language of vibration. Everything is interconnected. Everything responds to frequency. Everything pulses with intelligence. And you are part of it. Not as a spectator, but as a co-creator. There is a kind of wisdom that cannot be taught with words. It emerges in the silence between questions, in the intuitions born in the midst of pain, in the synchronicities that appear as coincidences, but carry messages. This wisdom has always been here. But for a time, humanity chose to divide. To divide the world into matter and spirit. To separate knowledge into reason and intuition. To fragment the human being into body, mind, and soul. But that division was an illusion. And now, it begins to dissolve. The notion that science and spirituality are opposites is recent. For millennia, the greatest discoveries of the universe were made by those who prayed before they observed, who meditated before they experimented, who listened to nature before trying to control it. There was no conflict between studying the world and revering the mystery. There was communion. Gregg Braden reminds us with clarity, science is the modern language of miracles. This doesn't mean that miracles have lost their mystery. It means we can now recognize them with more awareness, and greater responsibility. Because this reunion is not just conceptual. It is internal. When the mind and heart align, something ignites. A new way of living becomes possible. Not based on control, effort, or rigid logic, but on sensitivity, resonance, and presence. In this new paradigm, the human being is seen as divine technology. Not in the sense of machines, but as living circuits. Each thought is a command. Each emotion, a frequency. Each intention, a vibrational seed. What you feel is what you emit. What you emit shapes what you attract. What you attract defines what you experience. There is no longer a separation between inside and outside. The universe doesn't respond to hollow words. It responds to coherence. To the real vibration of what you feel when you're alone. To the energy that flows when you choose from the heart. To the presence you cultivate in stillness. This is the call of inner technology. And it's not in the future. It's here. Breathing with you. Pulsing in your heart. Waiting to be activated. But for that to happen, we must look back. Not with nostalgia, but with humility. The ancients didn't have degrees. But they had deep listening. They didn't speak of epigenetics, but they knew that anger makes you sick. They didn't mention quantum physics, but they knew that intention heals. They had no laboratories, but they had temples. And in those inner temples, they accessed wisdom that we are now beginning to call science. The wisdom of the future lies, paradoxically, in the roots of the past. It's as if humanity had to forget, so it could now remember. Had to doubt, so it could believe again, not with blind faith, but with vibrational experience. That's why this reunion is more than a merging of vocabularies. It's a return. A return to wholeness. To a knowing that thinks and feels. To a feeling that understands and transforms. When science and spirituality become one, there is no longer debate. There is reverence. There is connection. There is purpose. And you are part of this. All that we now try to prove with instruments and formulas, the ancients described with songs and metaphors. They didn't have the vocabulary of modern science, but they had the sensitive listening of the invisible. And that doesn't make their wisdom less true. It's simply another way of seeing. They looked at the sky and felt its cycles. They touched the earth and heard its silences. They closed their eyes and accessed other realms. For a long time, this wisdom was ignored, mocked, dismissed as irrational belief. It was called superstition, primitivism, mythology. But what was once considered mysticism, is now measured in laboratories. Heart frequencies that change with emotional states. Electromagnetic fields that expand with compassion. Cells that respond to intention. Genes that reprogram through emotion. What was once sacred, is now quantifiable. But the divide between science and spirituality never truly existed. It was a creation of the modern mind, a mind that needed to protect itself, defend itself, try to control the uncontrollable. But now, that mind is growing weary. It is beginning to open. It is beginning to remember there is more than what can be explained. When we listen to the ancients with the heart, something is revealed. They weren't speaking of gods outside of us, but of divine forces within us. They weren't describing a distant heaven, but a present consciousness. They weren't asking for blind faith, but for vibrational alignment. They left us maps, not of external territory, but of internal states. Each symbol, a mirror. Each ritual, a frequency. Each teaching, a reminder, you are part of the whole. And the whole vibrates through you. You feel this, even if you can't yet name it. Perhaps in the silence between thoughts. Perhaps in the peace that arises when you contemplate nature. Perhaps in a tear that falls without apparent reason. but carries a memory you didn't know you remembered. This reunion is internal. You don't need to travel to the Himalayas, nor memorize quantum formulas. Just breathe with presence. Feel with depth. Say yes to the wisdom pulsing within you. Spiritual truth is not belief. It is vibration. And you can recognize it because it reminds you of who you already are. Gregg Braden, Bruce Lipton, Joe Dispenza, and so many others are not bringing something new, they are translating the old into a new language. They are saying, in modern terms, what elders once whispered around sacred fires. And now, it's up to us to listen. Because when the body hears what the soul is whispering, reality changes. Not by magic, but by coherence. Not as a miracle, but as alignment. Not as a promise, but as truth. You are not broken. You are in transformation. You are not alone. The universe is listening. You are not lost. You are coming home. And the first step of that return is remembering. Remembering that the ancients knew. And that you do too, even if you can't explain it yet. Not as blind belief, but as vibrational knowledge in action. As a reunion with your own origin.